Hello and welcome to Undercurrent. 12 years ago, the Department of Finance wrongfully sued Peter Kane and Alan Endres in seeking the recovery of misappropriated funds. The men filed a counterclaim which, despite a strong defence by the government over the past decade, looks as though will be successful. If so, billions of dollars will be paid out in damages. The damages will create a huge black hole in the Gillard government's forecast budget surplus in 2013. Megan Belowski has the exclusive interview with Peter Kane, who tells us what the government won't.
Good evening, Peter. Thanks for joining us on Undercurrent. How does it make you feel when, you know, your country, your government, your constitution is working against you?
It was totally horrific to be facing in 2008 a trial against top silks that the Commonwealth had engaged. We had no money. We had to do it ourselves. Until the Saturday before the trial started, we didn't know what their case was. And we started to hear it when we got up and had the trial in Canberra. So we then started to realise that they were claiming still that we were conspirators, because they had to. They had to run with that line, because that's how they started it.
This case hasn't been heard of. No one has heard of it. Do you think that politicians and the government have a certain responsibility to own up to things and explain what's going on, as opposed to covering it up and lying about it until one day they realise, you know, we're in a bit of trouble?
Well, it has been mentioned in the budget for several years now, but until this year, they have said that our counterclaim has no merit. Well, they've now taken that out. They're now saying to the public, well, effectively, that our counterclaim does have merit. But more important than that, they are more accountable for what we see as a cover-up in the mismanagement of monies years and years, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Nobody in their right mind back then would have thought, and it shocked us when we found out, that the transactions happened because one person pushed buttons on a keyboard and that sent money out of the Reserve Bank into our accounts. Now, we didn't know that was what was happening. We had no idea. And
the contractor that did that, he was arrested, he was prosecuted, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, and he was convicted of paying money out to us in an unauthorised way. So it became apparent to us that he had committed a fraud on the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth then jumped to the immediate conclusion that we were part of that as a conspiracy that we were part of it, and they based their case on us being criminals.
What motivated you to keep fighting this? 12 years is a long time. What kept you and your partner Alan going?
Well, we were right and they were wrong. They accused us of being involved in an activity which was underhand and criminal, and it just wasn't the case. From the date of the injunction, our assets, all of our business assets, and indeed our houses, also were frozen because of injunctions that were granted to the Commonwealth Government. The court initially refused the injunctions, but the Commonwealth gave an undertaking to the defendants that if the Commonwealth was not successful in their claim against the defendants, that the defendants could make an application against the Commonwealth for damages for the monies that we've lost as a result of the case.
If and when you win the case, at the moment it looks like you will end up winning the case. Obviously there's $4.3 billion that you're owed in damages, plus interest, which at the moment is estimated at $2 million a day for the 12 years. That's $10 billion. How is that going to affect the Gillard government's budget surplus and, more importantly, taxpayers?
Well, it will have a significant impact on the budget because, as I understand it, a $10 billion payment it'll absolutely wipe out any surplus that they're thinking about. So it's a significant issue. Now, that brings into question, why aren't they dealing with this? Well, we don't know. We're confused about that. So we need to get on with our lives. We've got people that surround us that are involved, people a lot older than I am who are just waiting on the outcome so that they can move on, and nobody's doing anything. So there's no sense of responsibility within government, it seems to me. They're not dealing with the problem. But how will it affect us? Who knows? That's a bit too far away for me to be determining or deciding how it's going to affect us. It's just still a hard road. Every day we just don't know.
Thanks, Megan. With drug use amongst young Australians on the rise, journalist Samantha Cowell speaks with clinical psychologist Dr. Brendan Della to provide an insight into drug use amongst young Australians.
With an increasing amount of young Australians experimenting with drugs to help them study, health professionals are becoming increasingly alarmed. I spoke to clinical psychologist Dr. Brendan Della to find out more. Now, what is the percentage of young people using drugs in Australia?
Well, we know from national health surveys that it's around 23 to 25% of people aged between 17 and 25. So if you're looking at university students, there are about 25% that have used some form of illegal drug in the last 12 months.
What are the common reasons that lead to young people using drugs?
Around the age group of around 15 to 25, there's a lot of experimentation, just trying things out for novelty's sake. There's a second group of people who are using drugs to cope, so they're not sleeping very well, or they've got some anxiety problem or depression. Those people are at risk of developing problems with their drug use, like addictions, for example. So there's two kind of very different types of drug users, if you will. One that's using for fun or experimentation, and the other using to cope with stress or anxiety or sleeplessness or depression.
Do you think that university students use drugs for recreational reasons, or is it mostly to treat the stress and pressure at university?
It's a very difficult question because I think it's a bit of both. And as I said before, there are those two groups of people. So the groups of people who do experiment with drugs and socially take them, they tend to not have any long-standing problems. So there's a group of people who do dabble, I guess, and then move on and get careers and become responsible and so on. The ones that have problems with drugs tend to quite early on use it for things like stress and anxiety. Those people tend to do worse. You know, we know this for a fact now, that they go on to develop problems with their health, addictions, for example. The ones that are having more recreational use tend to do better long term than the ones that are using to treat or self-medicate.
One pill makes you larger, and one pill makes you small, and the one...
Well, I think it's stemmed from a recreational thing, and that probably started when they were in high school. I know that when I was in high school, that's what I did. I experimented with those kinds of things. But now that we've kind of moved into university, those things still kind of happen. But it's also a social thing, and lots of people like to get together and take drugs in the social recreation arena. So I think it's one way that people get to do it.
They like the effects it gives them. They're young and rebellious. They want to try new things.
I think it's because of stress in school, like pressure, and they like find some way to release the stress, and sometimes it's also under the influence of their friends.
Being at university can be quite stressful, and this is a hard thing to try and get assignments in all the time, so sometimes drugs might be able to help you relax or to do assignments or finish them in any kind of way.
What kind of help is available for university students who may be using drugs?
Universities all have a health service. The best thing to do outside of a university if people are uncomfortable is to seek help from their GP first and get a referral to the appropriate service. And young people also have an opportunity now to engage in mental health services such as Headspace, which there's 2 Headspace centres in WA, but with the recent budget there's going to be a lot more. So we're going to have these drop-in centres where people can get health services, who are young people, that are going to be relatively accessible. There hasn't been in the case in the past, so that's going to be something that's going to hopefully open the doors for treatment.
If you've paid any attention to the media over the last few years, you'll know that there are lots of concerns about security in taxis. Well, there's some big changes coming. From now on, you won't just be recorded on video, they're also going to record the audio. Mara Pamana investigates.
A Perth taxi driver has spoken exclusively to 9 News about his terrifying attack by a group of teenagers. The driver was glassed.
I don't like getting taxis because I find last time I had an incident with a taxi driver, he was rude.
I'm not a fan of taxi drivers at all.
But do you feel safe in there?
Yeah, I'm not going to be attacked or anything. They're probably more worried about me than them.
I think the security in taxi business is something that the government really need to look into, yeah, because you know, as you hear taxi driver get beaten up.
Ollie, recently there has been a bit of an accident with a taxi driver being abused and beaten and then ending up in the hospital. Tell us more about the security of taxi drivers.
There are cameras now. They're just about to be upgraded to a new specification that the government has created, and they start to be installed as of July 1. The audio is only going to be held for 12 days. The new specification, the new standard of camera, will be taking far more images within the taxi, and the other feature of it will be the audio recording. The taxi driver and the taxi companies do not have access to the material that is either photographed or recorded within the taxi. So it can only be accessed based on a complaint and via the police.
What would be a message to the public in regards to your safety?
So there needs to be respect from both sides of the coin in terms of customers and the public respecting that the taxi drivers have a job to do, and that's from point A to point B, and likewise taxi drivers, you know, respect that their passengers should be afforded, you know, the basic. We have a code of conduct for drivers and regulations, and to deliver the service within the scope of those regulations.
I'm here with an experienced taxi driver. How do you feel about introducing audio and video in the cars and then holding the footage for 12 days?
I had the worst taxi assault ever happened to me, and I ended up having a broken jaw. But when the incident happened, and I called the Victorian Taxi Directorate people to take out the video footage for a female passenger who was hitting me with eyeliner. I was surprised, not even surprised, I was shocked to hear when the directorate officer, the Victorian Taxi Directorate officer, told me that my camera is not working. And he told me to come next day because the camera can still hold the footage for about 36 hours in Victoria. When I told the day driver to go to the directorate to get the camera fixed, that officer over there told that the camera is working properly. So it was a shock, because that means that the officer from the Victorian Taxi Directorate didn't want the incident to be taken further up. They always call taxi drivers to be at the bottom of the transportation system, whereas we actually help the most when there is no transport available, or when there is a natural calamity or any accident, any trains not working, any bus strikes. We are the one who take all the load, all the pressure with the drunk, with the old age, with everyone. But in return, what we get? Sorry mate, your camera is not working, can't help you.
I'm sure we're going to be hearing plenty more about that. Now, if you've got any comments about any of the stories you've seen so far tonight, or you've got an idea for a story for us to do, find us on our Facebook page or go to our website at wtvperth.com.au. We'll be right back with more Undercurrent. Welcome back to Undercurrent. In his continuing series of chats with well-known personalities, Nick Hayes is down at 150 East having a talk with one of Perth's most well-known financial industry operators, John Poynton. They talk about the global economic crisis, philanthropy and muscle cars.
John, thanks for joining us. As a senior member of the financial community, how are you reading the state of play here in Perth?
Well, I think it's quite interesting, Nick, at the moment, because we've got ostensibly this major boom going on and full employment, unemployment rate's very low, and lots of cash sloshing around in the system, people being paid lots of money, but the retailers are squealing, people in real estate are hurting, and generally people are saving rather than spending, so there's quite a contradiction going on. It's probably wrapped up largely in a couple of things. One, the shock people got, and probably didn't feel it necessarily straight away, but then it sank in later from the effects of the GFC. And then what's happened with interest rates being relatively high, not in a historic sense as far as the Reserve Bank's concerned, but for someone borrowing money with the bank margins on top of the Reserve Bank official rate, rates in people's hands when they're borrowing are actually pretty high. And I think people have kind of, found that to be having an impact on their sort of ability to spend.
So John, the United States, we saw the global economic crisis, what happened there rolled right across the world. Are we in any danger with our markets and the way that Australia's situated?
I think there are a couple of points to make, and they're fundamental. One, that we have a much better regulated banking system. We had before the crash, we have after the crash. And so our banks came out of that whole period in much better shape. Yeah. And the second thing is the way Americans buy real estate and borrow money on real estate. Essentially over there you can buy a property, borrow money, and then if you get into difficulty or if the value of your loan in a sense is above what the property's worth, you can just walk away. Whereas here obviously they can, and they'll have a crack at you for the rest of your assets to get paid back.
Is there any chance that that kind of unregulated behaviour happened here in Australia?
No, not as far as I'm concerned, no.
What's the state of play for business here in Western Australia? Are we strong? Are we perceived to be a good place to do business?
Absolutely. I think that, we're probably, and we saw it through the GFC, one of the luckiest jurisdictions in the world. Whilst our markets, our share prices fell along with the rest of the world markets, they recovered very quickly. But if you had a look at the underlying economy, it was still very strong.
How do we change that? I mean, how do we change the...
It's actually not a bad thing if you think about it. If you think that our real estate is still relatively expensive compared with the rest of the world and that we had too much personal debt, our companies are in good shape, but individuals and families had too much debt, that actually saving and paying some of that debt down is not a bad thing. We're going through that transition period.
What are we looking for in the Citizen of the Year?
Western Australia is part of a global economy, and we've got people and companies doing things, amazing things, globally. And I think what we want to try and do is just highlight some of those people, as well as the people who are, doing great things in their backyard, in their local community.
When you're not heading up ashore, what are you doing?
I fly helicopters, and I love collecting muscle cars, and I'm really trying to get into this whole philanthropic thing, and really elevate the interest and level of giving in Western Australia.
Just on the philanthropic activities, what can we be doing better?
We're seeing it as a bit of a portal through which givers and receivers can pass and learn more about giving and receiving and how to do it well, but also just generally try and embed that ethos about giving into our community. We think that there's things we can do to make people feel good about giving.
John, I always finish off with the last question is, what do you love about Perth?
I don't know, I just think I love the environment, the can-do. It's a wonderful place. There's a lot of energetic people who really want to do things and achieve things. In parts of the rest of the world you don't get that, so I just love that here.
I'm in the park next to Burswood Casino and it's incredibly serene. A very different story to what's happening over in the Perth CBD at the moment. It's a virtual construction site across the whole city, traffic congestion everywhere, and certainly lots of people are concerned that all of the changes that are being made, particularly for Choggum, where's the consultation? We ask you.
With Perth City looking more like a construction site than a capital city, in this week's Vox Pops, we're asking people whether they think the roadworks are taking too long, knowing there's 5 more months to completion, and whether only 2 lanes on Wellington Street behind me will be sufficient. Tell us, what do you think about the delays in the city and all the construction work and all the traffic that is forming?
It is causing a lot of problems. It's making me late going to work and getting home from work.
I think generally Perth traffic's pretty bad.
I think it's pretty good. A good facelift for Perth.
I don't really know too much about the traffic, but the construction delays are ridiculous.
Give me another extra 15 minutes of just not be at work.
For progress and for change, you have to have a certain sort of essence of problems within the city infrastructure when they're actually trying to develop the city in a positive way.
Looks disgusting, makes us look filthy.
Well, it's something that has to be done every year for every type of city, right? Like even in Canada, I mean, like summertime for us that's construction time, so it is something that has to be done.
I don't know any business in there that hasn't lost a lot of money this year for the first time.
I reckon they're doing a great job, but I think they should hurry up.
So what do you think about those delays probably going up until October?
That long? Gosh, I didn't know it would be that long. That's pretty bad, actually.
It's just something I have to live with. There's nothing I can do about it. Try not to get stressed.
Another 5 months? I don't know about that, but then that's going to be a disaster.
Do you think they should have consulted the public and not just informing them about taking 2 lanes off as well?
Not really, because by the time they actually put the surveys in, change would be a lot slower, and people want change.
Actually, yeah, taking off 2 lanes wasn't a good idea. That really clogs everything up, so yeah, definitely should have consulted the public.
Everybody wants to rule the world, but there's a lot of people around here not doing nothing to help the world. If you live in the community, you've got to be part of the community, do stuff for the community.
Well, there we have it. There has been a mix of opinions on the roadworks, but only time will tell if the disruptions were worth it. Amar Pamana for Undercurrent.
Now, if you'd like to be a part of our Vox-Pop segment, we'll be in the Murray Street Mall every Tuesday at noon. So come down and have a chat during your lunch hour. Christy Molliker discovers a brand new exhibition at the Fremantle Prison that tells the story of these brave women to whom many of us are related.
We are all well versed with the stories of the fleets of ships that brought Australia's first white settlers to our shores. The stories of blood, sweat and tears of those convict men who built our early roads, bridges and buildings and helped shape our nation as it stands today.
But very little is mentioned about the women who came to Australia on those very same boats, enduring the same harsh conditions as the men, often separated from their children and forced to a life of hard labour. A brand new exhibition here at the Fremantle Prison tells the story of these amazing women that are the mothers of our nation, and it's believed 1 in 5 of us are related to.
Amazingly, the women have been very under-researched, underrated. We always hear about the famous men in Australia's history, but not the women, so it's really time this did come to the fore. This is an amazing exhibition, a tribute to them through stories, artefacts, film, so that we can learn more about these women and their lives in colonial Australia.
What kind of lives were these women leaving behind in the UK?
It was a time of famine and poverty, and a lot of these women had ended up in jail for fairly minor crimes, such as theft. That was the highest incident rate, and this was stealing, something that they could then on-sell to create income for their family. And it was decided to clear the jails and send them all across to Australia to start the population in Australia.
What was life like for them when they got here to Australia?
It certainly wasn't an easy life. They'd arrive on the convict ship and they were often inspected while they were still on board the ship to see if they were suitable as marriage material or to be a servant in a household. There had been a real shortage of females until they started transporting them across. This was one of the main intentions for the United Kingdom sending them to Australia.
So was it better to be selected to be married?
Yes, I think it certainly was. You had the choice, if you were considered to be marriage material, of going to someone's home or being shipped off to a factory and sent to hard labour, put to work in production, such as weaving, spinning, laundry duties, down to rock breaking. Meals were very meagre, the conditions were cramped. It was not an easy time.
What are some of the most significant pieces we'll see at the exhibition?
To me, some of the more poignant, touching material are the excavated artefacts that came from digs. We find children's toys that were at the female factory in Parramatta. There's little marbles, dominoes, part of a toy set. And this reminds us that these were families here, as well as hardened criminals that were sent across. 1 in 5 Australians actually has an ancestor who came as a convict woman, and we now have a record of over 9,000 female convicts who were in the female convict factories. They're really the backbone of the country. It certainly weren't just the men that arrived here, so it's time we learnt their stories too.
Well, that's it for this week on Undercurrent. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you've got any comments about any of the stories tonight or any ideas for future stories, get in contact with us here at the station. You can check out our website, wtvperth.com.au. You can contact us on Facebook or on Twitter. I'm Jason Jordan. Catch you next time.